Good day everyone. Today, we will be presenting marriage contract, one of the most important legal documents in a person's life. First, let's start with its definition. A marriage contract is a legally binding agreement between two individuals who wish to get married. It formalizes their union and is recognized by law as a civil status. This contract proves that the marriage took place and includes important details such as full names of the bride and groom, the date and place of the marriage, and the name of the witnesses and officiant. It is issued by the government, usually through the Philippine Statistic Authority or PSA or the local civil status, and it serves as legal proof of the marriage for various purposes like filing taxes, applying for loans, and processing immigration documents.
The marriage contract plays a vital role in both the legal and civil aspects of a marriage. One of its primary functions is to serve as official legal proof that a valid marriage has taken place between two individuals in accordance with the law. Without it, the union would have no legal standing and could not be recognized by the government institutions or the courts. The marriage contract is a requirement for registering the marriage with the Philippine Statistics Authority or the PSA, which maintains all the civil registry records. It is also an important document used in various legal and administrative matters such as applying for spousal benefits, visas, passports, inheritance claims, insurance, tax benefits, and other legal proceedings like annulment, legal separation, or adoption. Moreover, the marriage contract functions as a foundation for the legal relationship between spouses. It establishes rights and obligations such as living together, observing mutual love, supporting each other, and being faithful to one another. In terms of property relations, the marriage contract may also determine the applicable property regime, such as absolute community of property, conjugal partnership of gains, or separation of property, depending on whether or not the couple executed a prenuptial agreement. The contract is executed on the day of the marriage or ceremony itself, often immediately after the solemnization of the marriage. It is signed by the bride and the groom, the solemnizing officers such as priest, judge, a minister, imam, or mayor, and two adult witnesses. The completed marriage contract is then submitted to the local civil registrar for proper recording and issuance of the official PSA certified marriage contract, like this one. It maintains purpose to legally bind the two individuals as husband and wife and to provide a formal, legal basis for the rights, duties, and obligations that accompany marital status under the Philippine law.
So a marriage contract is a special contract where the parties, the bride and the groom, agrees to enter into a permanent union based on mutual love, respect, fidelity, and support, primarily for the establishment of a conjugal and family life. So it's more than just a legal agreement, it's a social and moral commitment recognized by the state. So this is defined under Article 1 of the Family Code of the Philippines. So it says here that a marriage is a special contract of permanent union between a man and a woman, entered into in accordance with law for the establishment of conjugal and family life. So it is the foundation of the family and an inviolable social institution whose nature, consequences, and incidents are governed by law and not subject to stipulation. In short, the parties agree to be lawfully wedded spouses, to live together, observe mutual respect and support, and uphold family obligations, and to be bound by the rights and duties imposed by law upon married persons.
Now let's go to the parties and obligation of a marriage contract. In a marriage contract, the main parties involved are first, the bride and groom. These are the individuals getting married. Their primary obligation is to live together, observe mutual love, respect, fidelity, and support, as stated in the Family Code of the Philippines. Second is the solemning officer. This is the person authorized to officiate the marriage, like a priest, pastor, imam, judge, or mayor. Their role is to make sure that the marriage follows the legal and religious requirements. The third one is the witnesses. At least two people of the legal age must witness the marriage to validate the contract. And lastly, the civil registrar. This office records and keeps official copies of the marriage contract and ensures it is properly filed and documented. Each party plays a crucial role in making the marriage valid and legally recognized. The obligations go beyond just signing the document. It includes moral, civil, and legal duties, especially between the husband and the wife.
Let us now move on to the elements of the marriage contract. So first, the consent. So the consent is the free and voluntary agreement of the parties to enter into a contract. So both the man and the woman must freely give their consent to marry. So this consent must be expressed first personally before a solemnizing officer during the marriage ceremony. So consent must not be obtained by force, intimidation, fraud, or mistake. So if it is, the marriage may be declared voidable under the law. So for example, a forced marriage or one where a party was tricked into marriage lacks valid consent. So this may be declared voidable by the law. So next element is the object. So we know that the object is the subject matter. So the object refers to the thing, right, or service that is the subject of the contract. So the object is the marriage itself, a legal and permanent union between two persons. So this union is aimed at living together, forming a conjugal partnership, and building a family. So the object must be definite, lawful, and possible. And the last element is the cause. So this is the consideration. So the cause is the reason or purpose why the parties enter into the contract. So it's what each party expects to gain or give in return. So the cause is the mutual obligation and commitment to live together, to provide mutual love, respect, and support, and raise a family. So it's also about entering into legally recognized status that brings certain rights and duties.
Although the marriage contract itself is a brief civil document and may not explicitly list detailed responsibilities, it gives rise to various obligations that are legally imposed by the Family Code of the Philippines once the marriage is validly executed. These obligations may be identified and classified according to their legal nature. The first obligation is the obligation to give or the real obligations. One of the clearest examples of a real obligation arising from the marriage contract is the obligation of mutual support. Under the Article 195 of the Family Civil Code, spouses are legally required to support each other financially, emotionally, and physically. This support may include the provision of food, clothing, shelter, medical care, and education. Other obligations arising from the marriage contract is the obligations to do or not to do, or what we call the personal obligations. The marriage contract also establishes several positive personal obligations. These include the obligations to live together under the cohabitation, be faithful under the fidelity, render mutual help and respect, and manage household affairs together. These are duties that involves actions or conduct that each spouse must perform, making them positive personal obligations. Aside from positive personal obligations, there are also negative personal obligations arising from the marriage contract, like the duty to refrain from committing acts that betray or harm the marriage, such as adultery or abandonment. While not always written in the contract itself, these are embedded in the law and automatically enforced upon the marriage execution. Other obligations arising from the marriage contract is what we call the legal obligations imposed by the law. The obligations that arise from the marriage contract are not voluntary or optional, but are legally imposed by the family code. Even without a written list of terms and conditions, the law assumes that both parties understand and agree to abide by the duties that come with marriage. Therefore, all obligations arising from the marriage contract are ultimately legal obligations. They are binding and enforceable in court. The last obligations from the legal contract, or the marriage contract rather, is what we call the reciprocal obligations, in which both parties have duties. All obligations in marriage contracts are inherently reciprocal. That's true, meaning
let's now move on to the legal implication and other relevant things that we should know about marriage contract. Uh, this one I have here is the marriage contract in Makati City, and it's the marriage contract is not just a ceremonial document. It is basically the binding agreement between the two individuals that carries serious and lasting and legal consequences. The first, once a marriage contract is registered with a civil registrar and all the means that required, such as legal capacity, consent, and the ceremony, it creates a valid and recognized marriage under the law. This affects both personal and property relation between the spouse. Second is entering into marriage automatically triggers certain legal obligation and rights. This includes mutual support, cohabitation, fidelity, and jointly managing the household. These obligations are enforceable, meaning if one spouse fails to fulfill them, legal remedies may be available. And the third one is that marriage contract also has implication on property relation. Unless the couple enters into prenuptial agreement, they are automatically governed by the default property regime under Philippine law, which is usually conjugal partnership of gains or absolute community of property. Depending on how they got married, this affects how assets and debt are owned and managed during the marriage. Lastly, the contract impacts issues like inheritance, legitimacy of children, and citizenship of immigration status in some cases. It also determines how disputes such as annulment or legal separation will be approached. And important to know that marriage cannot be dissolved at will, unlike other contracts. Marriage can be legally ended through judicial means such as annulment or declaration of nullity, and not simply by agreement between two parties. So, in summary, the marriage contract is more than symbolic. It is a powerful legal instrument that affects various aspects of life. Understanding its legal application could be meaningful.